What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Formula One Power Rankings. My name is Connor, the co-host with the most, and it's been a while since I've done one of these. Kind of got caught at the wrong time. I've been trying to do this every two races, and like they had the race at Spain, and then they took a week off before they had the race at Belgium. So definitely a little bit of a delay, but I am back now and ready to talk about the drivers and where they stand. So we're going to start off with kind of a bit of a combo here. Number 20 and number 19. Number 20, Nicholas Latifi. Number 20, or number 19, George Russell. And I think it's more so a combination of not just how their performances have been on the track, but also what's been going on with Williams outside of the racetrack. The team recently was bought by an outside investor from the United States, and recently Sir Frank Williams and Claire Williams have both announced that they're going to step down from their managerial roles in the team. So the team is going to be under new management starting September 7th. So there's going to be at least one more race this weekend at Monza with Claire Williams in the pit box and Frank Williams running the team. But after this weekend, they are both going to be out of position and the new management's going to take over. So it's going to be interesting to see the future of the team. The new investors paid off all of Williams's debts, and they are hoping to become a more competitive team here in the upcoming years. They're going to still keep the same operations, they're going to keep the same name, and they're going to still operate outside of the UK. Even though it's a US investor, they're still going to have their base in the UK, where Williams has always been from. So, but obviously, Russell, as usual, is the one who's a bit more successful, but both drivers struggling and the team struggling as well. So, number 18, we've got Romain Grosjean down one spot. You know, same as Williams, Haas has just been in the garbage can, so to speak, in these past few races. Really, this whole season, Haas has just been slightly better. It seems slightly more consistent. So I've got Grosjean here. I mean, he had a 15th place finish at Belgium, which is about as much as you can hope for the Haas's this year. I know Gene Haas recently announced that he is going to continue pursuing this Formula One team. There was some questions as to whether Haas would leave the sport or not, but with the prospect of the upcoming regulation changes in a couple of years, Haas have extended their contract for another 5 years, so Haas is not going anywhere. And they're hoping to be more competitive once the regulation changes come into effect. So number 17, we've got the first Alfa Romeo of Antonio Giovinazzi. Not a fantastic result. Latifi and Russell and Grosjean all had like some better results than Giovinazzi did, but I think I'm putting him here just because Alfa Romeo has clearly shown that they are the eighth best team. Like Haas and Williams are kind of always fighting for that last spot on the grid. They're always fighting down below, whereas Alfa Romeo pretty much has the edge over both of those teams, it seems like. So I've got Giovinazzi up here at number 17. Definitely not having a fantastic year. I'll be interested to see if he keeps his seat next season, because obviously this is the Ferrari controlled seat at Alfa Romeo, like I've mentioned in previous videos. And I mean, I know Ferrari's going to have two young drivers next year, but who knows? Maybe things aren't going to work out with Carlos Sainz, or for the foreseeable future. So they need another young driver that can show that they can compete. So number 16, we've got the other Haas of Kevin Magnussen. This 16 through 20 was really hard to rank. So I mean, Magnussen, I just gave it to him just because I think he's had the best combined results of the other four plus him. So Magnussen up at number 16 again. Really disappointing season for Haas. They were hoping to be better, but so far they have not been better. So number 15, we've had a guy who's had a few good results here recently, up 3 spots this week. Kimi Raikkonen at number 15, a 14th place finish at the Spanish Grand Prix, and a 12th place finish at the Belgian Grand Prix. So some good results for Kimi Raikkonen. Spa has always been one of his best tracks. I mean, he's won quite a few times at Spa. I know early in his career it seemed like he couldn't lose at Spa. He won like 3 or 4 years in a row at Spa. So Kimi Raikkonen always strong in his races, and who knows, maybe a little bit of a resurgence for Kimi Raikkonen. He had been having some poor results as of late. He'd been one of the worst drivers statistically on the grid. He still hasn't scored any points, but still a 14th and a 12th place finish will do a lot for his confidence, and who knows, maybe it will convince him to stick around for another year. There's still a long season to go, but maybe it will convince him to stick around for another year and continue to help develop the other young Alfa Romeo drivers. So number 14, we've got Danny Kvyat. I do feel a little bit disappointed that I have to keep him here at number 14, given that he finished 12th and 11th in the two races, both just outside of the points. So it's clearly on the top end of the drivers who are like just outside the top 10. He's that guy that's kind of always hanging around just outside of the top 10. It's more so the fact that I'm keeping him here because he hasn't been able to get into the points. Had he gotten into the points, I would have put him above the next two drivers, but mainly just because these other two drivers have ahead of him have potential to be better. It just depends on whether their car and whether their team can get behind them. But Kvyat's still a very strong driver, even though he's down here at number 14. I don't see any reason why AlphaTauri would want to drop him next year. I know there was probably some idea that maybe they would want to bring in another young driver, but I think having Kvyat there is like the older, more veteran type driver at AlphaTauri to manage the young drivers like Pierre Gasly and whoever comes after Gasly, because Gasly, given the way he's performing this year, isn't going to be at AlphaTauri much longer, whether that be a seat at Red Bull or a seat at another one of the bigger teams. But Danny Kvyat, number 14. So at number 13 and number 12, I've got the two Ferrari drivers, and I mean, I just don't know what there is to say about Ferrari anymore. Leclerc falling down all the way from number 4 on this list, all the way down to number 13. It seems like this is what he's done. He'll be like, he started the year at number 3, and then, he fell all the way down to like number 10, I think, and then went back up to number 4, and now he's fallen back down to number 13. It's shocking what's been happening to Ferrari over the past two races, especially. I mean, Sebastian Vettel did get a nice 7th place finish at the Spanish Grand Prix, but I mean, the fact that neither driver could get out of Q2 in Spa, and the fact that they both finished outside of the points is something that you never see from Ferrari ever. The only time you ever see both of their drivers finishing outside of the points is if they both have mechanical failures or something like that. So definitely not a promising sign for the future. I know team principal Matteo Binotto has said that he doesn't think that they're going to win regularly again until 2022 when the regulation changes come. But I mean, given the money and given all the investment and research and staff and workers and just the resources that Ferrari has, they shouldn't be down finishing outside of the points every week. They should be up there competing with Red Bull and Mercedes in the top 6 and competing for a championship. So I'm not sure if it's a lack of poor leadership or just a lot of, obviously they had the unfortunate incident with the engine last year that their engine got banned, so now they're running a slower engine. Because it's certainly not a lack of funds. I mean, because when you look at some of these other teams like Williams and Haas and Alfa Romeo, you say, oh, well, they're down near the bottom of the grid because they don't have the money. You don't have the money to invest in all the good technology and all the extensive research and all the upgrades. But the thing is, Ferrari has all that money. They have the funds to be able to do that. I mean, they are by far the richest team in Formula One. And the fact that they're competing down here, not even getting in the points, is very much very much a head scratcher. I have no idea why this is the case, and I'm sure a lot of people would like to know why it's the case, like why they can't put out a better car. But I guess this is the Ferrari that we have right now, and like I said, I'm sure Carlos Sainz is probably not too happy right now. He thought he was getting a good deal signing with Ferrari, and now seeing their performance this year, he'd be better off staying at McLaren. So at number 11, we've got Esteban Ocon. He's very poor performance at the Spanish Grand Prix, but a strong performance at the Belgian Grand Prix. Very strong performance for both Renault drivers at the Belgian Grand Prix. Esteban Ocon obviously still finished below his teammate, but like a 13th place finish at Spain, but a 5th place finish at Spa. It looks like Renault, I mean, if they can keep this up, Renault, they definitely have the pace to be up there competing with some of the better teams with McLaren and Racing Point, but I think it's all down to driver talent. We'll see how Ocon does. Ocon is obviously the weaker of the two drivers. I did drop him down 2 spots this week. despite the 5th place finish, just mainly because of that 13th place finish, and also there were some other drivers that had some better performances. So he did drop down this week, but if he keeps it up, then expect him to be raising higher on this list in the future. So number 10, I think we probably have one of the most standout drivers of 2020 so far, in my opinion, Pierre Gasly. You know, the guy lost his seat at Red Bull last year. There's even been some rumors now talking about is he due for a move back to Red Bull, and Red Bull's still saying no, like Albon's our guy. So Gasly's just going to have to keep proving that he is a great driver. I mean, a ninth and an eighth place finish, 2 points finishes back to back, for a team that is probably the sixth best on the grid right now, behind McLaren, Racing Point, and Renault. Who knows who's right there between them and Ferrari, but at least there's 5 teams better than them at this point in terms of raw pace of the car. So the fact that the driver is getting more out of the car than it's worth is really showing a lot. It's showing a lot of maturity. It's showing a lot of skill from Pierre Gasly. And I mentioned this earlier. I can't foresee him being at AlphaTauri much longer. I mean, who knows if Red Bull's going to pull the plug on Alexander Albon? I'll get to that a little bit later when we talk about Alexander Albon, but if it's not Red Bull, then when one of these other teams has an opening, one of the maybe like if Racing Point has an opening in the future, or Mercedes, Valtteri Bottas only ever signs 1-year contracts with Mercedes. Maybe Mercedes is going to look at Pierre Gasly as their next big thing to bring in. I know they've got the whole development team with Williams, and George Russell is obviously due to drive a Mercedes one day, but who knows? They could bring in Pierre Gasly as like that second driver, to kind of partner George Russell and whatnot, because he certainly has the talent. So definitely a very strong showing for Gasly, and we'll see how he does the rest of the year. I'm looking for big things out of Pierre Gasly. I would expect a lot more points finishes and a lot more success. I don't think a podium is in the works, but definitely a lot of points finishes and a lot of strong pace from the Frenchman. So number 9, also down one spot this week, we've got Daniel Ricciardo. Despite a 4th place finish at the Belgian Grand Prix, that 11th place finish at the Spanish Grand Prix definitely hurts. It's definitely something. It's the same with Ocon. I'm trying not to be too optimistic about Renault until I see them do it at more races, because it seems like they'll have a weekend like they had at Belgium where they finish like 4th and 5th, or they'll finish like 5th and 7th or something, and you're like, oh wow, like Renault's getting back in the fight, but then they'll have a weekend like they had at Spain, where they finished 11th and 13th, both out of the points. So there's no doubt about it that Ricciardo's a talented driver. I mean, he's probably one of the top 5 or 6 drivers on the circuit. He just doesn't have the car that some of these other guys do. So there's no doubt about the talent that Ricciardo has. I could definitely see him getting a podium later this year. I don't see it for Pierre Gasly, but I could see Daniel Ricciardo getting a podium if he can keep up the form, and if Renault can keep putting out the car, like if they can put out a car that they had at Spa, then Renault definitely and Daniel Ricciardo can compete for a podium this year. Obviously, he's going to be moving to McLaren next year. Right now, McLaren is winning the war against Renault in the Constructors' Championship, so the fact that Ricciardo is able to get so close to the podium driving Renault, it makes me excited to see what he's going to do when he moves to McLaren. I think a lot more podiums are to come for Ricciardo, and who knows, maybe he'll get his shot with a big team again too before he retires. He's obviously getting up there in age, but he certainly hasn't lost any of his talent. So number 8, up a lot of spots this week is Carlos Sainz. I know he obviously finished in last place at the Belgian Grand Prix. He couldn't get going, but the prospect that he qualified 7th in both races, the Belgian and the Spanish Grand Prix, and he finished 6th in the Spanish Grand Prix, gives me a lot of hope for Carlos Sainz. Obviously, it's been a rough year for him. I know after finishing in 6th place in the Drivers' Championship last year, being 11th was not exactly where he anticipated being this year, especially with McLaren being 3rd in the Constructors' Championship. They definitely have the car to compete. I think Sainz has just been the benefactor of a lot of unfortunate incidents. I think a lot of his low finishes were not his fault. They were a lot of either incidents with other people or mechanical failures, like was it Belgium. So Sainz is he's one of the top drivers on the grid. He's just had a lot of misfortune this year. Um, and I would love to see what would happen if we can have 2 consecutive weekends where Sainz does not have any mechanical issues or doesn't have like a tire blow like what happened at Silverstone. I would love to see where he finishes because he's got the talent to get podiums as well, especially with McLaren being up there competing with Racing Point to be the third best team. So it seems like McLaren has more pace on race day too. The Racing Points seem to be really good when it comes to hot lapping and qualifying, but come race day, it seems like the McLarens have more pace. So um, definitely looking forward to see what Carlos Sainz can do in the upcoming races. So number 7, we've got his teammate Lando Norris. At one point, this guy was third in the driver standings behind the two Mercedes drivers. He's fallen down to sixth since then. Um, a couple of maybe disappointing results for him: a 10th place finish at the Spanish Grand Prix, a 7th place at Spa. So both points finishes, but I'm sure given McLaren's standing, he would want to do better. He would want to be up there fighting in the top 6 with the Red Bulls and with the Mercedeses to get possibly on the podium. I mean, it's kind of hard to break through the big 3 right now, but if one of those big 3 has a mechanical failure, whoever finishes in 4th would be the one who's right there. And like last week, that would have been Daniel Ricciardo. If one of the big 3 had had a mechanical failure, then Ricciardo would have been on the podium. So I know Norris is hoping to be up there in the 4th and 5th place spots to be competing for podiums, but unfortunately that just hasn't been happening for him in recent weeks. I definitely expect him to be back up there in the future, but for now he's going to sit at number 7. So number 6, I think back to back on this list at number 6 and number 5, we've got the two Racing Point drivers. Sergio Perez first at number 6, up from number 11 last week. The only reason he dropped down that far was because of the fact that he didn't start in either of the Silverstone races due to being testing positive for COVID-19, but he is back and he's just as good as ever. A 5th place finish at the Spanish Grand Prix, a disappointing 10th place finish at the Belgian Grand Prix, but Belgium definitely was a bit of a disappointing weekend for Racing Point. We'll move on to Lance Stroll, a 9th place finish for Lance Stroll at Belgium. It's kind of like them and Renault kind of swapped places. Really, like Racing Point had the really good weekend in Barcelona, finishing 4th and 5th, and then Renault had the really good weekend in Spa, finishing 4th and 5th. But then Racing Point finished 9th and 10th. So it's amazing to me that none of these guys have gotten on the podium yet. I think it just really is a testament to how good of a driver Max Verstappen is, because no one's going to compete with Lewis Hamilton and Valtteri Bottas when it comes to the podiums, unless one of them has a mechanical failure because that car is just too good. But when it comes to that last podium spot, it's all about driving skill. And even though the Racing Point cars have shown that they have the pace to be possibly the second best team, it's the driving of Max Verstappen that's really put him over the top and makes so that those top 3 are just untouchable by the other team. So because I would have expected at least one podium for Racing Point at this point in the season, but so far they've got 0. I mean, the only other podiums this year have gone to Lando Norris, and surprisingly, 2 of them went to Charles Leclerc. So we'll see what happens as the season goes on. The pink Mercedes is still very quick, very fast, and they've got 2 talented drivers. So, a podium certainly is in the works for the pink Mercedes. So number 4, up one spot, we've got Alexander Albon. Now, finishing in 8th and 6th is probably not warranting of number 4 on this list, but the fact that he's just been consistent finishing in the points up this high, I think is more so why I have him up here. And the fact that he's still holding on to 4th place in the Drivers' Championship. It's just the other teams are just too inconsistent. Like the Renault drivers finish up in 4th and 5th, but then the next week they finish 11th and 13th. The Racing Point drivers finish 4th and 5th, but then they finish 9th and 10th. Albon is consistently finishing in the 5th, 6th, 7th range, possibly 4th sometimes. He's kind of finishing in that range, so definitely consistent for Albon, and also some interesting news coming out recently about the Red Bull car that Albon's been driving. The fact that Christian Horner has come out and admitted that Albon's car does not have all of the same upgrades and same equipment that Verstappen's car has. So Alexander Albon is competing on the same team with a car that is subpar to his teammates. I'm not sure how I would feel about that if I was Albon. Obviously, Albon knows that he's the second driver on the team. Verstappen's obviously the poster boy. He's the the number one, the guy that we want to win the championship. But Albon's still there to, compete for podiums and possibly compete for wins. And the fact that they're giving him a subpar car really shows a lot of. I mean, it's kind of mirroring what's happening with Sebastian Vettel at Ferrari. Like, it seems like Ferrari, at every chance they get, they're trying to favor Charles Leclerc, which is understandable because Vettel's on the outs. Vettel's going to be leaving the team, but still, for Albon, there's been no word that he's going to leave the team in the upcoming season. Christian Horner even said that they're not even considering swapping him with Pierre Gasly. So I would be a little upset if I was Alexander Albon driving the same car as Verstappen, and it's a slower car. It's not up to the performance. So, and it makes me scratch my head as to why Red Bull is doing that, because part of what makes a good race strategy is having two drivers up there competing with the other two drivers, and so that way you can, one of them can kind of protect from the other when the others goes in for a pit stop, like hold up the other drivers, or really breathe down their necks, and it really helps when you have both drivers out there. And the fact that when it comes to fighting with Mercedes, Verstappen's always going to lose because he doesn't have his teammate up there to also help him and fight for that, fight with the Mercedes, fight to try and overtake them, fight to maybe slow them up when Verstappen goes in the pits because, they're behind him. Verstappen doesn't have that because Albon doesn't have the same car, so it puts him at a huge disadvantage. It puts Red Bull at a huge disadvantage too every week when they're competing with Mercedes. So definitely a head scratcher, but Albon definitely still has the talent to possibly get up there on the podium if Red Bull can at least give him a car that is similar or on par to Verstappen. I mean, we'll see. I don't know. It makes me scratch my head though as to why Red Bull has decided to do this, especially with how dominant Mercedes has been. If Mercedes wasn't that dominant and Red Bull kind of had us, they were kind of on the same level, I could maybe see that because then Albon could still kind of be with they're fighting with them. But with how dominant Mercedes is, you need both drivers and both cars to be on the same level and up to the highest standards. So that way you can compete with them, because otherwise Mercedes is just going to keep winning every week. So number 3, we've got Valtteri Bottas. I definitely considered putting him up at number 2. I mean, it's just the same old story every week. Bottas is just playing him and Verstappen. I guess I'll spoil it that Verstappen's number 2. I mean, they're just playing second fiddle right now. It's like they have nothing for Lewis Hamilton at all. They're fighting it out for second and third place, and all the while Lewis Hamilton is running away with the championship, which obviously means that Lewis Hamilton's number 1. But it's making for I would hate to say boring, because obviously, that's going to make me sound like, oh, I hate Lewis Hamilton and I hate that he's winning and blah, 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 blah. But honestly, it really is boring. I mean, it's kind of reminding me of last season, too, when, this championship fight looks like it's going to be over by the time we get to halfway through the season. And the rest of the season is not going to really mean anything unless something dramatic happens. So it's really disappointing that Bottas and Verstappen can't, you know, Verstappen, I can maybe understand why he can't do it because obviously he doesn't have the car to compete with Hamilton. But at least Valtteri Bottas, I mean, he's driving the same car, and the fact that he's getting outdone every week when he has the talent to win, he's shown he has the talent to win. He just can't seem to put it together on a week to week basis. He'll have these really good weeks, or he'll go through a really good stretch, but then he'll fall off. Whereas Hamilton's good all the time. So like I said, it makes me disappointed the fact that Hamilton has won 5 of the 7 races. I mean, one of them he honestly shouldn't have won anyway, the one at Silverstone, but again, luck was on Hamilton's side, and he managed to get all the way around before Verstappen caught him. And so, I mean, it's just one thing, I said this in the last episode, it's like, when is Lewis Hamilton's luck going to run out? I don't know. It doesn't look like it's going to run out this season the way that it's been going because Bottas can't seem to compete with him, and Verstappen doesn't have the car to compete with him. So that leaves only one competitor, and that's Valtteri Bottas. And Bottas isn't stepping up to the plate. So it's disappointing to see only 1 or 2 drivers able to compete with the guy who's leading the championship. You would like, ideally, to see at least 5 or 6. I mean, if you look back to the 2012 season, when realistically, at different times throughout that season, there was at least 5 or 6 people that could have won that championship at different points. You had Sebastian Vettel, you had Jenson Button, you had Lewis Hamilton, you had Fernando Alonso, you had Mark Webber, you had Kimi Raikkonen, you had 6 guys that were all competing for the championship. Whereas this season, you pretty much have three. And even last season, or not last season, the season before in 2018, on a week-to-week basis, there was six drivers that could win on any given week. You had Hamilton, you had Bottas, you had Vettel, you had Kimi Raikkonen, you had Verstappen, and you had Daniel Ricciardo, all who could win on any given weekend. But now the fact that that's been reduced to three, Verstappen, Hamilton, and Bottas, and really only two with Hamilton and Bottas. I mean, I think some of Verstappen's second places have been more gifts to him by mistakes that Bottas or Mercedes as a team have made. So it's making for a disappointing season, and I'm like I said, I hate to call it boring because it makes me sound like, I'm a huge hater of Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes, but it's just like, you want to see more competition. But obviously, I can't deny how good Lewis Hamilton is and the fact that he's probably going to win his seventh championship. And unless something dramatic happens, he's going to break the all-time record for wins this season. He's only 2 wins away from tying Schumacher, and we were only on round 7 of the season, and there's supposed to be 17 races, so there's still 10 more races to go. And I highly doubt, Lewis Hamilton's not going to win at least 3 of them. He'll probably win probably 5 or 6 of them. So props to Lewis Hamilton and props to Mercedes, but just definitely would like to see something more competitive and more people fighting up there for the championship. So definitely looking forward to the regulation changes to see if they can maybe tighten the field up just a little bit. Maybe get Red Bull and possibly someone like McLaren or Ferrari, if they can figure out whatever they're doing, get them back into contention for the championship. So that's going to be the episode for this week. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I know it's been a while, but I'll be back with this after the Mugello race. We've got Monza next week, this upcoming weekend, and then Mugello coming up right after that. So I'll see you guys then. And as Zach always says, remember to be clutch.